Attention, everybody. The views and opinions expressed on the show are not necessarily those of Axe Ministry, Axe Media Group, and/or their affiliate and supported ministries and/or nonprofits. He's here today. He's going to talk about something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, I guess. It's Crime Time with Dr. Steve Albrecht. Take it away, Steve.
Thanks, Producer Matt. Welcome to Crime Time. This is Crime Time Podcast Episode 59. I'm Dr. Steve Albrecht. I'm joining you from the Axe Media Group studios in Springfield, Missouri. For this hour, I'll be talking with Kenn Blanchard. Kenn is a conservative and a gun rights advocate, and he runs a website called Black Man with a Gun. Kenn Blanchard is a gun rights activist and has lobbied the U.S. Congress for the rights of all gun owners. He's an ordained Baptist pastor who has testified in the state legislatures for Virginia, Texas, South Carolina, Michigan, Maryland, and Wisconsin. He's a former U.S. Marine, federal police officer, firearms trainer in the CIA, national security intel analyst, and also internationally known as Black Man with a Gun. He's been podcasting since 2007. He has voiced commercials for TV and traditional radio against racist gun laws. He's been featured in 4 documentaries, and he has authored several books, which we'll talk about, and is still a conscientious resource in the gun community. So we'll talk to Kenn in just a moment. Thanks for listening to Crime Time, where we talk about crime and crooks and cops and personal security. We talk about some dangerous people and lots of heroes, and we even mention a few stupid crooks. Most importantly, I'll talk with you about what you can do to keep yourself and your family safe from crime and violence. As always, you need to be vigilant at home and in your neighborhood and in your community and at school and at work or even on the road. This show exists to make you feel more empowered, more secure, and more educated on security issues and the criminal justice system. As background, I worked for the San Diego Police Department for 15 years as a patrol officer, a reserve sergeant, and a domestic violence investigator. I now work as a training consultant and teach training workshops, focusing on human resources, employee coaching, workplace violence, and security issues at work. I've written 24 books on business, workplace violence, police subjects, and guns, all of which you can find on Amazon. You can reach me at my website, crimetimeradio.com. Send me an email. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Dr. Steve Albrecht, and you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Steve Albrecht. You can always find past episodes of the show on SoundCloud and new ones as they post on YouTube and Facebook.
And AxeMediaGroup.com. They're on there as well.
And AxeMediaGroup.com. So, Kenn, thanks for joining me this morning. Good morning to you, and happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
Thank you so much, man, for letting me come on the show.
You know, you and I talked a couple months ago when you were kind enough to interview me about my third gun book, the Albrecht on Guns, and I've got number 4 is I'm working on it. And I'm probably like you, Kenn. I'm a little fearful coming forward here with the inauguration, and we'll talk a little bit about. You know, I'm not a politics guy on the show, but this is a political issue, so we need to talk about it. But let's start with you, and what made you get into the podcast, to the website, to your books? What was the driver for that for you personally?
The driver for me actually was I always wanted to be in radio. I was that kid who loved Wolfman Jack and all the references to like the old-time radio guys. So when I became a firearms instructor and I got into business and made my way into activism, when that ended, for the most part, I wanted to connect with all the people that I had talked to, and podcasting popped up, and it gave me a chance to record from my basement, doing exactly what I wanted to do as a kid. So my first podcast back in 2007, the Urban Shooter podcast, ran on for about 12 years, and then I thought, well, social media is out there. There's 1,000 other black men with guns, so I can retire, basically. But it came back this year. I had quite a few people wanting to revive the old show. So in my 13th year with the Black Man with a Gun show now.
It's, you know, you were an early adopter of podcasting. I mean, you think about everybody and their brother. You know, my dog's got a podcast. I mean, everybody's got a podcast. Right. I started doing Crime Time back about 6 years ago, and I did about 50 episodes, and we did it for a year at a radio station in San Diego. And then we thought, you know, I can't monetize it, and it was just a hard time, you know, to do every week. And so we put it in the mothballs, and then, you know, this year in August, the good folks here at Axe Media asked me to come back and do it again. So you were an early guy. You got a good radio voice. You got a nice, deep resonance voice for that podcast. And now you look at podcasting, and, you know, you were an early guy for the guns rights issue in podcasts, but now there's a lot of people talking about guns in podcasts.
Yeah, the audience is surprisingly. When I first started, I wanted to be just the guy on the street that helped the mom that just bought a gun for home protection, be the person at the range that be trusted. I wasn't trying to get into mega millions or anything or save the world. I just wanted a community. But my community was not ready for gun rights and not ready for the Second Amendment. And that messed me up because I grew up in the country where guns were just a tool and nobody really talked about it. We just used it when we used it. And bringing that full circle, when I got involved in the gun rights activism, I got slapped in the face with cultural stuff that I didn't even know of my own race. There was history. There was a whole bunch of a legacy of just foolishness that I had to counter before I could even go into business. So I became an activist by default. I couldn't even be an entrepreneur anymore because I had to teach and preach the evangelism of the Constitution, the evangelism of the right to keep and bear arms, the evangelism of freedom. And that kind of like led everything after that. So now there's a whole bunch of people who have no doubt and are really glad about their rights, and they're buying guns like there's no tomorrow. And I'm like about 20 years too late to be rich.
I tell you, Ken, the business to be in right now, besides guns, is ammo. Man, there is just such a shortage of ammo, and I mean, I talk to my friends, and we used to buy 200, or we'd pay $225 for 1,000 rounds of 9mm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this stuff's almost 50 cents a bullet now, and you look at some of the websites, where you can buy bulk ammo, and they're either out of stock or the price is super inflated. Do you have a theory, either a good conspiracy theory about that, or just a general theory about the ammo shortage?
Oh, well, actually, it happened before when the Clintons were in, and then it passed. And I mean, it kind of rises and falls. And this time we got hit with a double because when the president put the tariffs and stuff on China, a lot of our raw materials for bullet making come from China.
Is that right?
So even those who do the home loads, their own, we call it when you're a loader.
Reload, right.
A reload guy, you're also at a shortage. So it's not just the that manufacturers, it's the DIY people are also short. That's what some of it hit that too.
So do you have a sense that we're gonna see more shortages coming forward after Biden gets in, and people are going to start to hoard and stock up, and kind of like toilet paper?
Oh, we're already there. It might take another, probably 2022. We'll be back to some type of normal after the thing dies. There'll be more guns bought and sold. Some companies will. I mean, it's since 1986 is when I first started doing this stuff. I feel really weird. I mean, being an old guy now, I feel like an old guy on some stuff. Just because I've seen it come and go. I've seen how companies drop, companies rise, people run, people get hyped up, and I learned just like in combat, you just kind of wait until the reload, and then you come back out.
Are you a Glock guy? Are you into Glocks?
I'm a Glock guy by default.
Yeah.
I remember when that thing first popped up, and I thought this was the ugliest gun. Everybody was trying to get the best 1911 they could buy, and then this Glock came up, and it was a little bit cheaper, and then the police department started taking it, and then I got trained on it. So it was the firearm that I used overseas. It was the firearm that I used in protective details. So it became like my go-to.
Like the 17 or the 19? The Glock 17 or the Glock 19, one of those two?
The 17.
17.
Full size.
So I got a quick story about that. I can't remember when Glock first came out, but does 86 sound about right? 86, 88, right around there?
Yep, that was it.
Well, I was with the PD in San Diego, and I was writing a column for our police newspaper, and we had a pretty good national reputation for the paper. It was our police association newspaper. And actually, the Border Patrol got some Glocks, and they were some of the first guys to get it. I mean, they got first generation, Glocks, 0 through 100, and I managed to buy one in I think 86 or 88, the first generation Glock that ever came out. And when I shot the thing, with the polymer frame and all that, I thought this is kind of cool, but it was at a time when the magazines were inferior, and so every time I shot anything that was not factory, right out of the box, good ammo, if you had shot any kind of reload, it would jam. And what happened was the clip, the material at the top that they used, the brass at the top that would hold the round in the magazine at the very top was too thin or somehow faulty, and it would bend. So it would double feed and it would jam, and you'd always have to tap rack bang all the time. So I kept sending mags back to Glock going, hey, what's the deal with this gun and these magazines? And finally, after about the third or fourth go round of these same crappy mags, I'm like, I gotta sell this thing. So I did, and of course the rest is history. I mean, they fixed that problem, and they flooded the market with guns. And I have, I think I have about 5 Glocks. I have the 380. I have the 45, the small frame 45. I have a couple 17s. It's a great gun, but my point is, back in the day, I was like, what is wrong with this thing? It's a fine gun, except it doesn't feed the ammo correctly. And so I was on the phone with those guys in Tennessee, or Georgia, I think it was Georgia, every week going, can you guys send me some other mags that aren't this, crappy? But of course they figured it out, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you are an early adopter on anything, you pay for it, and nobody really pays attention to that. What do you call it? When you're just doing all the hard testing.
Yeah, beta. You're the beta guy.
You're the beta guy. Yeah, that beta thing is hard, man.
Exactly. So I'm not talked to you about this, I don't think, in our conversation before. Are you an NRA guy, or are you not an NRA guy? I mean, I kind of ebb and flow with them. I'm a lot disappointed in their, their financial sagas and issues going on. And, there's been some cooking of the books in terms of how, they're spending money on Wayne LaPierre and these other guys to go all over the place. What's your take on the NRA as an entity, and are you a member?
Yeah, a life member. Back in the heyday, back in the 90s, I rolled with them pretty hard. And I started at the same time that Wayne did, and back before he was famous, and such, highly sought out dude and paid all the big bucks.
Sure.
So I watched from the inside and then thought, man, this is just wrong. But they wouldn't pay me any money. So
right.
I just kind of just watched the mess. And then as my closer friends either joined and quit, or were employees and quit, or got fired, or whatever, I was always like a B-rated actor. I'm not the primetime guy, but I still listen to conversations that happen on the inside sometimes.
So do you think they're in trouble? I mean, every Democratic Congress, or every Democratic institution, I think, like in New York, the state legislature is always trying to get rid of them and put them out of business. I mean, some people call them a terrorist organization, for God's sakes. And so, I feel for what's happening. I'm a member as well, and I want them to stick to their function, which is to advocate for my Second Amendment rights. And I think they get off into the weeds in some of these political issues and, infighting and financial, sagas and controversies and things, which I think is a big distraction. What's your take on their sense of survival and what they're going to do going forward against Biden? And
I think Biden winning is the best thing that could have happened for him, only because now they have a bad guy that they can promote, and under that they'll make some money. They won't make as much as they used to, because the image has definitely got crushed. They don't have the following they used to. They still have the hardcore over 45 crew.
Right.
Their demographic hasn't changed, and that's the only issue that they have, is that their demographic has not grown. So they're pushing some of the young country players to try to pull a younger audience in the country music section.
Right.
But that's still a small demographic. They're in trouble over the long haul, but what they've been doing will probably work still.
In terms of the race piece that you talked about, were you one of the first black guys to be kind of an activist under their umbrella, or how did you see yourself in comparison to the demographic that they had back then as now? I mean, are they more welcoming to people from, in terms of gender and race and getting women involved in shooting? I mean, do you get a sense that they've made a better effort in terms of expanding the diversity of the group?
Yeah, they've always been pretty diverse on the inside, but it's the they have a really good sense of their audience. So if you have 30 people who are really, really good people, really cool folks that are doing everything, and then they kind of like poll their members, if their members are cold to it, they'll drop that thing in a heartbeat, even though they know it's wrong.
Right.
So I've seen in the beginning, I was probably the most predominant black guy in there, except for Roy Ennis, who he kind of limited himself. He was from New York City, and the enemies that he made and the stuff that he did on television kind of limited how he could be presented to the masses. But I was the young 30-year-old back in the day, and they pushed me as much as they could. But this was all before social media,
right,
and all that. And then they had a really promising dude that was in the Institute for Legislative Action, was one of their lobbyists, and he went well until he left them and became like a news commentator. But it's never been a lot of people, just a few. And then they've had just bone after bone issues of just being stupid. I mean, just pushing on one demographic, not trying to push the envelope.
What's the name of the lady? I thought she did some stuff for them. Dana, is it Loesch?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was she affiliated with them for like a TV show or an online show or a social media show? Because I thought she was pretty popular there for a while, and I think she got a bunch of death threats and all kinds of stuff was going on. You know, people are targeting her personal life and her husband, and I've kind of lost touch with her. Is she still in the movement in terms of the conversation about guns, or I've lost touch with where she's at, especially on social media?
I think once the what did they have? They lost their media outlet. Once Ackerman and Queen went down, that's when they lost Coleon Noir, Dana Loesch. They lost all their televangelists they had for a minute. So they're all doing their own thing. They're still around.
Right, I see. So when you look at your work in terms of evolution, you know, it's kind of a broad question, but you say, I mean, I think personally, you know, because I write books about concealed carry and I believe in it the way that you do, I think we're really on the edge of a revolution in terms of national concealed carry. I was hoping that Trump would sign H.R. 38, you know, it would get through, the concealed carry reciprocity bill would get through the House and buzz through the Senate and it would get onto Trump's desk. But I still feel like you say, there's a common enemy, you know, with gun owners and Biden. And also, parenthetically, I get your take on this guy too. I'm a little worried about Beto O'Rourke, what kind of role he's going to play in the administration, if any, God forbid. But the idea that gun owners are not being dragged through the coals as homicidal maniacs that can't take care of their firearms, because we've seen the active shooter where gun owners, especially like the church in Texas, have saved the day, and this idea that more people are buying guns in during the pandemic and during the election. So I think there's a revolution that's coming back again where we're now front stage behavior instead of backstage behavior. When you look at your sense of it, I mean, what are we doing right in the gun movement today? What are we doing well? What's helping us?
Social media is really kicking butt. Folks are doing things on their own, and America being America, just being free. That thing has finally got out to folks that are untraditional gun owners. So now that we're going through that, now there's a power grab for who's going to win the hearts and minds of these people. Because now it's like a lot of small guerrilla outfits. We used to have the focus of the NRA. Everybody joined, whether they agree with them or not.
Right.
Everybody joined. Everybody was a part of them at their annual meeting, even though the meeting might have been made for, like, after hours is one giant country music thing. Even though everybody isn't in the country, they still joined and had their own parties. They lost that now. So now we have splinter groups. We still have the Second Amendment Foundation. We have Gun Rights of America. We have a whole bunch of groups, but they don't have the cohesiveness or the clout. So it's hard to use the power of the people without leaders, without a banner.
One of my groups that I belong to is United States Concealed Carry Association. I like the folks there. I write for their magazine probably, every 6 months or so they put a piece in, and I think I got like 3 or 4 pieces coming out next year for them, kind of spread over 2021. I like the folks there, but I also like the insurance and the $35 a month that I think that I pay, and and I also have a connection with a guy out here in Missouri who's a pretty well-known gun rights lawyer and a Second Amendment guy and a criminal defense attorney. So I mean, I've already made contact with him, and his business card is in my wallet, next to my retired cop badge and my CCW card. I have the HR, what is it, 216, 217,
nice.
National Concealed Carry. So I like concealed carry as an entity. Do you have any interaction with those guys, or you've kind of followed what they're doing in terms of their publication and the insurance and whatnot?
Man, I'm so deep into the weeds. I remember when Tim got started the USCCA. Tim was my first sponsor, my second sponsor for my podcast.
Nice.
I remember when the magazine was there, the insurance took off. I'm connected to everybody. The guy in Missouri. Not Kevin, is it?
Yeah, it is. It is Kevin Jameson.
Okay.
Yeah, Jameson. Yeah. So we know the same cats. That makes me feel good that you've known those guys since the old days, and that's I've kind of put my faith in.
Yeah.
And if you look at USCCA, I also know that NRA has insurance as well. I've not compared the plans, but do you see some sense that they're pretty much the same, or you like the insurance in NRA better or concealed carry better, or?
Oh, on that one, to me that was one of their bonehead moves when they tried to compete with USCCA. That didn't work too well. They got sued just recently with New York for something to do with their carry insurance. They had a guy.
Go ahead.
They had a guy who offered to share stuff, and they kind of threw it in his face and wanted to compete with him instead.
Right.
So that's what happened with USCCA and Carry Shield. There's some moves that you look at people and go, that could have been a lot better. We're not fighting each other.
I mean, I think as a responsible gun owner, and you say if I'm concealed carry, that I have the insurance, I don't plan on shooting anybody. I don't plan on getting in any beefs. I think you and I have the same perspective, which is I'll protect myself and my family to the death, but I'm not out going around solving the world's problems. And I wrote about this in my third gun book, which is there's a really specific criteria when you get involved in stuff and when you shouldn't. And you say, well, the guy arguing with the guy at the parking lot at the liquor store is none of my concern. I'll be a professional witness, and if I need to call the cops, I'll call the cops. So I think the insurance, protects you for those rare events where you say I had to take lethal action. And the society we're living in, I mean, it's probably worse now than it was back in the day in terms of litigation. So it seems to be just a no-brainer that you have to have the insurance because you want to live your life the same way. You have car insurance, you have house insurance. You say, I don't expect anything to happen. I don't anticipate getting in an accident. I don't anticipate my house burning down, but I got to have that stuff. And for gun owners, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I was hoping that the HR 216 would have worked, or was it 218? We were working, I was actually a chaplain for Law Enforcement Alliance of America when we pushed for that national concealed carry for law enforcement.
Right.
It didn't spread over to private citizens, so it was like a 90% win. It didn't go where we wanted it to go. But concealed carry, man, from the 90s when I first started, that was the thing that I didn't even know existed. It was one of the pieces. I didn't know that before 90, if the constable or the sheriff or the county administrator didn't like you, you would not get a concealed weapons permit. You could put in for it. I knew Maryland was bad from forever, but the rest of the country was just as bad. It was real dependent upon who was in seat at the time. So when we first started with Virginia and got that thing passed in 91, and then went to Texas in 91 and 92, started off almost like a nationwide tour to try to change the tide. And I got a chance to, I was working with the NRA then and the Law Enforcement Alliance of America, and they actually got me in front of legislators, and I did my bit to change the hearts and minds. And we worked. We did it for like 5 out of the 6 places that I went to, and I was happy. And it just continued on to folks are realizing that it's not a bad thing. And you'll now that we're winning the hearts and minds piece. Now we still just got to get some of our rights down. Folks think they're entitled to some things they're not.
I get, I was hopeful that, I said that Trump would somehow get H.R. 38 onto his desk, so this reciprocity for concealed carry. I mean, you see how you know better than I do how ridiculous this stuff is. I mean, Illinois has really draconian gun laws, in New York and Maryland, where I'm from, Baltimore originally, and then you look at California and you say, where I grew up most of my life and I worked in the PD. Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego, you can't get a gun, concealed weapons permit if your life depends on it. I mean, you just can't. But you go to some of these outlying sheriff's territories where the sheriff runs the county, and it's pretty easy to do. But then we see all this skullduggery and trickery where these sheriffs are getting bribes and they're getting payoffs for campaigns to get people on the CCW list. There was just an indictment of the head of security for Apple that's in with this indictment with the number 2 guy, the undersheriff in Santa Clara County, where they basically said, give us, I don't know, I think it was like 200 iPads for our sheriff's department, and we'll get you guys, 3 or 4 of you guys in Apple's security team concealed weapons permits. So there's a huge indictment that just came down about all that, and these guys are in tons of hot water. So you've seen throughout your career the political nature of CCW permits. So it's not based on a valid need premise. It's based on, did you contribute to my campaign? Or you look at these sheriffs in a lot of these smaller counties. They go, hey, we're gonna put our thumb in the eye of these bigger cities and say, hey, we'll do it over here. So there's no sense of continuity about the whole subject.
No.
When you look at
some of that's on purpose, though. We still have the 10th Amendment that allows the states to take care of their states, and unfortunately, it trickles down even closer to counties and towns. So, when
you look at Trump leaving office, I mean, do you have any kind of inside knowledge that he's going to do anything of a master stroke, with an executive order before he leaves that'll do anything for gun rights, or that's off the table?
No, I think it's truly what they call a lame duck session. That's what's happening right now. He's going to wait things out until he leaves.
So let's talk about Biden for a second. And my sense of him is that, like a lot of other politicians, and you've seen in your career, is that they talk about a lot of stuff to get elected, and then they go back to focusing on whatever it is on their primary agenda. I mean, lots of stuff gets talked about in the campaign that they're going to outlaw or get rid of or add more to or bring in, and a lot of stuff. Then they get distracted by other shiny objects, and they can't get to that. But do you think Biden's on the path in terms of this gun tax, this magazine tax, the stuff that he was talking about in the campaign?
I think it's just, and it's what they do, and it's what they have been doing. We still have a majority of people who don't go for that, and the good news is now there's more Democrats now that are pro-gun than ever before. So even the new people have to kind of redress how they used to act.
And I think there's a movement I've seen in the last couple of years, especially with women. I got my daughter into shooting, and women who were afraid of guns had got really good training from other women and really good training from guys like you, and made the range experience really positive. So that piece is huge. But do you think, in the worst case scenario, is Beto O'Rourke going to be the gun czar for Biden, or do you get any sense, or that's just political talk?
No, I haven't even, until you mentioned his name, I hadn't heard anything pop up anywhere. But there's always, like we had a Cory Booker for a minute. I mean, there's always a name that somebody's going to try to use to erase their profile. If you want to get famous, all you got to do is be against firearms.
Right. And
it will raise your profile from zero to fake hero in a heartbeat.
Have you seen the research from John Lott? I mean, I had him on my old podcast way back when, and he's done a lot of writing on guns and gun control. And he's a pretty strong opinion guy, and I think he's kind of a polarizing guy. I mean, do you have a sense of him and his research?
I didn't hear whose name it was.
John Lott.
Oh, yeah.
Do you agree that he's kind of a polarizing guy? I mean, I had him on the podcast, and I referred to him, in the introduction, as a gun rights advocate, and he sort of blew up, and was like, "Well, that's not what I do. I'm a researcher." I'm like, "Okay." I mean, you're still talking about stuff that I agree with, and things that most people have the Second Amendment. I mean, do you have a sense of the guy and what he's been doing in terms of his? Because he has a lot of research, and he gets sort of beat up in the press about the stuff that he comes out with, the reports and whatnot.
Yeah, John. Yeah, Doc Lott is funny. He is like a professor. He's into research. Doesn't want to be labeled. wants to do his own thing. He knows his facts. He has his stats, but he's not the advocate that you expect.
Right.
You nailed it. I mean, he knows his stuff, but don't expect him to fight on national television with some of the folks that are out there. And I have the same issue. I can do my thing in my arena, but I'm not quick-witted enough to debate some people like a lawyer would. And folks want that quick tongue, and I don't think Dr. Lott or myself have that. So that happens sometimes.
When you look at what you've seen over the last year, especially with the riots and the pandemic and all the stuff we've been dealing with, you've got the Antifa piece, the Black Lives Matter piece, you've got the defund the police piece. A lot of these things, if you really boil them down, it has to come with, it comes down to personal safety. So there are a lot of us, I think you and I, and a lot of other gun owners and concealed carry people are just saying, hey, I want to keep myself safe. I want to keep my family safe. It's not about politics. It's about safety. And so, you look at all this stuff and what's your take in terms of kind of the disappointments that you've seen from all these groups? I mean, whether it's the politicians, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the defund the police people. What's your? I mean, my sense is they're missing the larger picture, which is, if we can't keep our cities safe, if we can't keep our top 10 population cities safe, we don't have a country. I mean, if you're the San Francisco Visitors Bureau, if you're the Portland Convention and Visitors Bureau, if you're the Convention and Visitors Bureau guy in Chicago, how do you get people to come after the pandemic is over to your city to spend money in conferences and conventions and meetings and things? I mean, our top 10 cities are war zones. And so the outcome of all this protest and whatnot, I think these people in all these groups just miss the idea that every American wants to be safe. And if you're not safe in these cities, we don't have cities.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of anybody who's been marching and protesting lately. I don't like any of those groups. I couldn't stand the civil disobedience when I was wearing the riot gear myself. I remember pushing back on folks that were professional protesters, and you could tell them their cars had like 3,000 bumper stickers on the back, and they moved from one issue to the next.
Kind of the Occupy guys, the Occupy movement, those kind of cats.
Yeah. They made that thing a profession.
Right.
And then they were all legal students, all knew their rights. They were quoting the Miranda Act before I even got it out. They were putting their hands back in the normal position. They knew where to go. They were waiting for their time. There's a movement of just, well, I guess it's always been there, but we're kind of back in the 60s, as I remember as a little kid, with the anti-government establishment. These are the hippies of the 60s in a different realm.
Right.
They don't like anything. And as soon as you agree with one piece that they have, there's probably 99 other things that are just totally off that you can't wrap your head around. It's like, all right, if you want to protest, that's fine. We have the right to peaceably assemble. We're supposed to have our grievances before our government. But this destruction and stuff is just crazy and totally uncalled for. So I can't get behind hardly any group that's out there because none of them have done, by the letter of law, what we're allowed and can do.
And you look at the irony of all this stuff. The Minneapolis Police Department and I agree, lots of mistakes were made in the George Floyd case. I mean, we can agree to that. But the defund the police, and so as a result, we have a lot of cops leaving the PD in Minneapolis, and then the legislators come out and say we need to get some more help from the sheriff's department because we don't have enough cops. And I think, God, the irony is just too delicious. You spend 6 months browbeating the cops and demoralizing them, and the ones that are good cops who have done their job leave, and we have really low morale, and they engage in depolicing, which is I'm just going to sit in the car and I can't get in any trouble if I don't get out the car. And then as a result, you have rising crime rates, and you say we have to get more help from the sheriff's department because we don't have enough people. I mean, the irony is just too delicious.
It's nuts, man. And I've been offered police chief jobs in crazy places like that. And they're like, hey, we could use you over here because you're like a peaceful guy and you can get folks to do things. I'm thinking, dude, that's like throwing spaghetti on the wall. I mean, I can't help that. That thing ripples. It's just gone. Our culture is different than it was. There's always been a low respect for law enforcement, but now it's in the toilet. It's really, really low. It's hard to motivate somebody like that.
There's a shadow issue connected to that, which is not only do we want to defund the PDs and sheriff's departments, but let's get rid of or decimate the school police. So LA Unified School District, the chief quits when they come in and they cut his budget in half. And you look at they're saying we're going to take school resource officers out of our junior highs and high schools. We're going to take armed cops out of the places where they need to be to respond to an active shooter. That'll show everybody how much we hate the police. And so it's sort of a shadow issue. We don't hear about it because it doesn't always make the news in terms of a noticeable police department or well-known sheriff's department. But we'll just go after these smaller agencies, these school PDs, and we'll decimate their ranks. And then we don't have anybody inside the schools. I mean, it's just I can't believe that's even. It's such a shadow way to punish the police department and by proxy punish the kids and the teachers and the parents that want their kids safe.
Yeah, those have been no wins for any solutions that they've given out here lately. Defunding the police, that whole thing, I worked for almost 20 years in the CIA as a CI analyst and anti-terrorist specialist, and I worked watching countries get decimated by political leaders and watching other foreign entities come in and tear down countries from the inside out. And that's happened here, where you put in shadow people, basically, and you run campaigns now they do it through social media. It used to be propaganda. And you get them to defund the police. All that stuff has been done around the world in other nations. It just finally came home to here.
But you look at the 60s and the 70s. I mean, I was born in 63, and so I caught sort of the tail end of all that stuff because I was just a kid. But I mean, I even the 70s and even the Occupy movement, none of that stuff you never heard the phrase defund the police. I mean, even when the police were at their lowest in terms of people's reaction to what they did during the Chicago Convention and things like that, we never heard anybody talk about defund the police. I mean, it's stunning to me. In this era that we're in, that's even up on the table as a conversational discussion amongst these politicians. And I mean, it would seem to be political suicide to me if you were an elected official that's what you're running on. But some of these mayors continue to get reelected, Portland and Minneapolis and these other places, and it's stunning to me. I mean, we didn't see that in the 60s. What do you think? I mean, is it Antifa? Is it Black Lives Matter? Is it politicians? I mean, where was sort of where did you first hear the defund the police conversation? Was it the elected officials that first started it? Because I'm sort of baffled how that became a national phrase.
Oh, well, actually, I'm only a year older than you, but I had the first time I heard about it was in the Black Panther Party in the 60s.
Okay.
In Oakland and Sacramento. And then when it spread across the country, they were the very first people to bring both socialism, communism, and the whole defund the police thing started with them. And they were having police patrols in the communities where they thought the cops weren't going to come. So it was through the Second Amendment that they were carrying concealed and carrying openly and trying to so they're using parts of the Constitution that worked, and then dogging it for the other stuff that it did. So it's been going, and it's been a connection, but we didn't have the social media and the ability to connect with thousands of people. So it was like in pockets. You would have a group doing something, they would get destroyed, bombed, blown, assassinated, and it would die right there. So in the communities of Detroit, in the communities of Washington, D.C., in the communities of Oakland, and depending on what pocket it was in the urban area, the news didn't go in that. It was there. Now, it's nationwide.
So, and I think that, you talk about the social media piece, and that's certainly an explosion, but I mean, Trump's argument through all this stuff is that the mainstream media has fed into this stuff so effectively with their position on this. I mean, they passively go along with, that sounds reasonable. Let's defund the police. I mean, just because they hear it in the streets, they broadcast this stuff 24/7. That part's discouraging to me. Ken, we have about 6 or 7 minutes left. I wanted to get back to your website and also get some plugs in for your books. You have more than one. Black Man with a Gun came out a couple years ago. It's available on Amazon. Let's talk about that book.
Okay. Back in 1999, I wrote the first version of it, Black Man with a Gun. People fear what they don't understand. And I created a website in 2000, right after that, to promote my book. And that book was self-published, and I pushed that thing for, I don't know, goo gobs of years. But I think I sold all of 3,000 copies. And in 2014, I got republished. The new version of it came out through White Feather Press, now available on Amazon. It's called Black Man with a Gun Reloaded. And it's pretty much a story of my 20-year reign trying to be a gun activist without losing my job in the government, and with a nice little glossary and some information for new shooters.
Nice.
Mixed in there with some gun activism. And that's that. I also write some fiction. I'm still working on it. I got my own werewolf horror fiction.
Nice.
I kind of mix it with music. So I have a werewolf playing blues player that's been hiding in plain sight for years. And I have a whole dramatic series about that called Solomon Love, is this guy. And that's also on Amazon.
And the podcast comes out on a regular basis?
I have 4, actually. There's I'm always behind this microphone. There's Black Man with a Gun, the podcast. You find that on blackmanwithagun.com. There's Speak Life Podcast, a part of speaklifechurch.net. There is the Reverend Kenn Blanchard Show, which is kenspodcast.com. And I think I'm missing one. But it's all good.
So
yeah, Indian Motorcycle Radio.
Oh, that's right.
You're
You're a vintage motorcycle guy too. So about being a Baptist pastor, do you see the work that you're doing as protective of the flock? I mean, you're a shepherd, right? You take care of people. You've been taking care of people for 30 years, right? Do you see yourself as a shepherd? I mean, that's the way I look at myself. I mean, I'm not a religious man like you, but I see myself as a shepherd for my family and for the community, and I try to impart that onto to other people and say that this is what it's all about. It's not being a badass because you can carry a gun. You're a shepherd. Yeah,
I've been beat up for it for decades, and now it's a lot easier. But in the beginning, being a pistol packing preacher was not a good thing. I got abused by my own church. Basically, I almost got thrown out of the one I was pastoring, and it caused me to go online to do online ministry, which works out even better for me, even though I do serve. Being a shepherd means that you will take care of your flock and anybody that's entrusted to you. It has nothing to do with association of your firearm as being a violent thing. And people think, or used to think, that if you have a gun that you are also a murderer. And those two things are not connected.
And so, I mean, that's powerful what you said. And I think, your voice to be a clear discussion about these things, it's such an emotional issue. I mean, besides abortion and a couple other things, it's so hard to see another issue besides guns and gun control and gun rights and gun freedom. So, I mean, it's so great to hear you talk in a reasonable way. Like most of the other people I know that are involved in guns, talk in a reasonable way about them, and we're not maniacs. And I think that's the part that a lot of people just don't sort of pick up. They group everybody, and especially from you, from the the perspective of race, they put everybody into the same box as this is how you are, and they label you.
This whole thing. This is why I stayed in it for so long. I didn't know what I didn't know. I learned I actually like country music when I didn't know that in the beginning. I also learned that some of the people who I thought were going to be racist because they were like the long-haired ZZ Top looking dudes,
right?
Were actually, I love ZZ Top, by the way.
Me too.
Were racist, and it was wrong. It was me being racist. I had to change the way I was thinking, and since I was wrong in so many things, I had to open myself up to other people, and it changed my whole world. Being in this gun thing.
So, as we wrap up with Kenn Blanchard, his website, Black Man with a Gun, his podcasts, several of those, and also his books on Amazon. I want to just get maybe a message of hope from you, Kenn. What as gun owners, responsible concealed carry folks, what do we got to do to look to do from the inauguration forward? I mean, what's your sort of message as here's the couple of things that we're going to do as gun owners? Just do we hunker down? Do we protect ourselves in terms of more guns, more bullets. I mean, what's your sense of going forward from the inauguration?
One of the best things about being an American is that we are free. You have to protect your freedom every day. You can't just let somebody else do it. You always have to be eternally vigilant that there's somebody trying to take away what you have the rights to. And if you realize that anybody that's a gun owner is part of family, you've gone through a background check, you've done some stuff, you are like-minded. Don't care what color you are, don't care what gender you are, don't care what your preferences are in life. But if you are a gun owner, that's a family member. And anybody who will give you a gun is family. Anybody trying to take one away from you is not. And none of us is as strong as all of us.
Well said, my friend. We've been talking to Kenn Blanchard. He's got a website called Black Man with a Gun, a book of the same name. He's a multivariate, talented guy, a pastor, an author, former Marine, intelligence officer, firearms trainer, just a lot of things to talk about. And check him out on his podcast, blackmanwithagun.com. Check him out on Amazon. Kenn, thanks very much for your time today. I really appreciate your conversation, and God bless to you, my friend.
Thanks, Doc. I appreciate that.
So thanks for listening to Crime Time, and my thanks to Jim Whining, producer Matt, and all the good folks at Axe Media Group. I'm Steve Albrecht, and thanks for listening to What I Know is Right.